Hi guys, this is Purely Math, and today we're going to be learning about evaluating functions. So first off, if you do not know what a function is, click in the top right and go to my last video to see what a function is. A different way of describing y in an equation is what function notation is, as you see right there. Pretty much what this means is that y is being replaced with f of x, as you can see the y becoming f of x. Y equals x plus 6, and then it changes to f of x equals x plus 6. It is read as f of x equals x plus 6. Okay, the first way of evaluating functions is plugging in numbers to the equation. How to plug in numbers to the equation? If you want to plug in, let's say 5 to f of x equals x plus 6, you write it like this. F of 5 equals x plus 6. What you will do after that is you will then solve by plugging in the 5 to the x, because for the first part, you put the 5 inside the x for f of x. Now you can solve by putting the 5 inside the x right there. And then lastly, just solve out f of 5 equals x plus 6 to get 11. So the answer for f of 5 equals x plus 6 is 11. Now we're on to some practice for evaluating functions with plugging in numbers. So we have the equation f of x equals 2x plus 3 and g of x equals 3x squared plus 8. For f of x, we're going to find f of 2 and f of 4. So let's get to that. So we're going to do f of 2 first. So we're going to rewrite the equation with f of 2 in there equals 2x plus 3. Then we're going to go to f of 2 and plug in the x. And then from there, we can solve. F of 2 equals 4 plus 3. And then f of 2 equals 7. So now let's go on to f of 4. So f of 4 equals 2x plus 3. And then write it again, but with plugged in x. And now we can solve. Equals 8 plus 3. And then f of 4 comes out to equaling 11. Now let's find g of x equals 3x squared plus 8. Let's find g of 6 and negative 1. So g, parentheses, 6 equals 3x squared plus 8. Now we're going to do g of 6 equals 3, parentheses 6, since we're plugging in the x now, plus 8. And then we get g of 6 equals 3, parentheses 36, and 6 squared is 36, plus 8. And then g of 6 equals 3 times 36, which will equal 108. And then add 8, and we get g of 6 equals 116. And lastly, now we're going to do g of negative 1. So let's go over here real quick. Rewrite the equation. Let's write a line real quick. Just dividing all this. G of negative 1 equals 3x squared plus 8. Now we plug in the x now. Negative 1 equals 3, parenthesis negative 1 squared plus 8. And now let's just move this over here. And that will be g of negative 1 equals 3, parenthesis negative 1 squared would be 1, plus 8. And now we can solve it out. It'll be g of negative 1 equals 3 plus 8. And now let's put it right back up here real quick. It was g of negative 1 equals 3 plus 8. And then that will give us g of negative 1 equals 11. Our final equations we got for f of 2, comma 4 is f of 2 equals 7 and f of 4 equals 11. And then g of 6 and negative 1 would be g of 6 equals 116 and g of negative 1 equals 11. The second way for evaluating functions is plugging in variables. So let's say we have x of 3 and we want to plug it into f of x. We're going to write it down like usual, f of x, but x plus 3 since we're plugging that in, and then equals x plus 6. Now we're going to plug in the x plus 3 into the x, so it'll be x plus 3, and I'm just going to write in parentheses to show I plugged that in. And then we can solve out f of x plus 3 equals x plus 9, since we just get rid of the parentheses and then add the 6 to the 3, and then it equals x plus 9. So f of x plus 3 equals x plus 9. Now we're on to some practice for evaluating functions by plugging in variables. So we have the equation f of x equals x squared plus 3. We're going to find f of 2x squared and f of 4x. So let's find f of 2x squared first. And then we're going to write it out, x squared plus 3. And then now we can plug in 2x squared. And then we're going to put parentheses around 2x squared since there's an exponent above the x. So we have to square this whole value right here on the next step. So now we're going to solve. And that equals, we're going to square the 2 and the x squared. So it'd be 4x to the 4th plus 3. And there you go, you have your answer, since we just plugged in every value that you can. Now let's do 4x. So f of 4x equals x squared plus 3. Let's plug in that 4x to the x and put parentheses around the 4x since it's going to get squared. And add 3. And then f of 4x equals 16 since we square the 4. And then we square the x. And then add 3. And we have our answer. The last way of evaluating functions is plugging in functions to another function. So we have f of x equals 2x plus 7 and g of x equals x squared. We're going to plug in g of x into f of x. So g of x equals x squared. So we're going to write the x squared in the f of x right there. So it's going to be f parentheses x squared equals 2x plus 7. So from our last method, the second way, plugging in variables, this is pretty much a similar thing as soon as we get to this part. So we're going to plug in the x squared into the x right there, 2 parentheses x squared plus 7. We're going to solve it out now. So that equals 2x squared and then plus 7. So boom, we got g of x getting plugged into f of x. Let's go ahead and get started with some practice for evaluating functions with other functions. So we have f of x equals x divided by 9, g of x equals 3x plus squared, and h of x equals 3x plus 5x plus 9. So let's do f of g of x parentheses. So f of g of x. So g of x equals 3x squared. So we're going to plug that in. And f of x just equals 9. Then we're going to plug in the 3x squared to the x. And that's going to equal 3x squared divided by 9. And then since we have 3 and 9, we can simplify that. So let's go one more. Now it's going to equal x squared over 3. Now let's do g of f of x. So g of f of x equals x divided by 9. And then it equals, what is it? It equals 3x squared. Then we get g of x divided by 9 equals 3, parenthesis x divided by 9 squared. Then g of x divided by 9 equals 3 times x squared divided by 9 squared would be 81. And then g of x of 9 equals 3 x squared divided by 81. And lastly, since 3 and 81, we can just do g of x divided by 9 equals x divided by 27. And let me rewrite that up here. It's going to be g of x divided by 9. Actually, g of x divided by 9 equals x divided by 27. That's an x squared. Okay, and lastly, let's just do h of g of x. So, g of x equals 3x squared. So it's going to be h, parenthesis, 3x squared equals, would be, if it's g of x, and h of x is getting plugged in, be 3x plus 5x plus 9. Let me scoot that over a little. And then h of 3x squared, you're going to plug that in, 3x squared equals 3, parenthesis 3x squared. And then plus 5, parenthesis 3x squared. Let me move it over a little bit more. And then plus 9. Now we can simplify for it to equal 9x squared plus 15x squared plus 9. Scoot that back over. And h of 3x squared equals 9x squared plus 15x squared. That can be simplified to 24x squared. And then add 9 right there, as you see. So, for our final stuff, we got f of 3x squared equals x squared divided by 3. Then g of x divided by 9 gives us x squared divided by 27, as you can see up here. As you can see right there. And then lastly, h of 3x squared equals 24x squared plus 9. Lastly, we have some extra practice. So pause the video real quick and figure out the answers for evaluating functions part 1, evaluating functions part 2, and part 3. Pause the video real quick and check your answers. The answers are in blue. And comment down below if you have any questions.